Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. So, when I discussed my role here, I said that in addition to present some new, strong ideas, I should entertain you a little bit. And I was corrected, not entertain, but stimulate or inspire. So my aspiration here is to provide a good, high-quality intellectual stimulation. So, responsible leadership and reasonable action. So I will start with a quote. I think it's appropriate because we are here at the Jepson School. This is from John Cmelikova. And this, I think, nicely set the context for this kind of a research track. She said that ethics lies at the heart of leadership. Responsible leadership needs a frame for reflection and the values-based to build upon. So my research is a contribution to develop this kind of a frame of reference, and especially the values base for responsible leadership. We have some theories about responsible leadership, but I think most of these theories are rather formal. And I would argue that we need to introduce some substantive, strong considerations from ecology, future generations theory, and from socialness to get a more robust and more meaningful concept of responsible leadership. So I will focus on three problems. The first is I'm much more interested in business applications, business leadership. So that's my primary focus in this afternoon. The main failures of business leadership today, and after that, what the extended conception of reason, advanced by Amartya Sen and others, would require in relation to ecology, future generation, and society. This will be, I think, something new. And finally, based on this, how can we redefine or understood responsible leadership in a meaningful way? I will give you some methodological considerations, some simple models, not just blah, 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 not just verbal things. So I will start with some inspiring sources. Important thinkers which are really relevant for this kind of research and thinking. One is Hans Jonas, philosopher from New School, New York. He already died. He was one of the most influential ethicists in the last century. And his book, Prinzip Verantwortung, the English version is the Imperative of Responsibility, published in Chicago, University of Chicago Press, is the most, in my view, is the most developed, most sophisticated theory of prospective moral responsibility. He was one of the first who introduced ecology more than 40 years ago, ecology into the main discourse, politics, economics, business, and bioethics. Actually, he considered himself a bioethicist. He was not interested in business, but his theory, I'm trying to show, is extremely relevant for business. So, another very important scholar is Edith Braun-Weiss from Georgetown University. She's a legal scholar, a philosopher, and she developed a very robust theory of fairness to learn future generations. Not just a broad verbal theory, but she developed, as a legal scholar, she developed some very well-defined, operationalized criteria to judge all behavior, I mean present generation behavior generations. Future generations understood as not yet born people. Okay? People who were born some 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. So not yet born people. What's the responsibility of us to work not yet existing people? And the third one is from economics. Of course, you know Amartya Sen, Harvard, but also Cambridge, Oxford. There's Nobel Prize winner in economics, and he's also a philosopher. And he developed, and I will use this conception, he developed a very broad conception of reason, criticizing a very narrow concept of economic rationality. And I think that the concept of reason is extremely crucial if you want to go further in responsibility thinking, in leadership. So I use his conception of reason to develop a more robust theory of responsible leadership. So, but before presenting this model, at least the main features of this model, some very critical remarks, but not just improvisation, about failures of today's business leadership. One main critical point is the extreme self-centeredness of business practice, business policies, and leadership today. I will present some argument about this. The second thing is self-centeredness or not. Goal setting is extremely self-oriented. So these two things together produce a lot of negative consequences for nature, for future, and for society at large. So just very shortly, self-centeredness. So the self and identity, the leader and his or her organization, organizational self, is usually defined in an extremely narrow way. This is called, as a technical term, but so well known in psychology, this is called the separative self. So you define yourself, you define your organization in separation from others, in separation from stakeholders, separations from the environment. So you define yourself as you are not. This is a separative self concept. So in today's business, we have this. We have this extremely narrow focus, extremely narrow definition of what we are. Okay? So this kind of a self-centered leadership in business, I think it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. It's really tend to destroy ecosystems to large scale. Local communities, but also future generations. I mean, destroying future generations means that destroying the chance of future generations for a decent life, destroying their capabilities, their freedom for a decent life. So this is a very critical remark. We can discuss this if you wish. The second one is even more dangerous. It's even a more dangerous phenomenon, well established in psychology, Albert Bandura and others. Moral disengagement. Moral disengagement. So the bad news is that if you are concerned with self-enhancement goals, it is more likely that you will use and employ some moral disengagement strategies which permit transgression. So that's a very long story, but this is an extremely important challenge to the invisible hand doctrine. Because this moral disengagement phenomenon can destroy all the supposedly related benefits, or most of the benefits of the invisible hand in a free market setting. So also we can discuss this, but this kind of dynamics, it seems to be unavoidable. So if you follow the self-interest track, more likely you will enter into the moral disengagement game, and you will justify moral and social transgressions and hurt others. So, but these are just two critical things. The central topic in my research and also my presentation, the distinction between rationality, especially economic rationality, and reason. So of course, for philosophers, reason is a well-known concept in the European philosophy, more than 2,000 years old history. But in economics, we have a very special concept, a very special notion of rationality, and there is a conflict between the two, which is not just the philosophical things, it's enormous practical implications. The conflict between rationality and reason. So Amartya Sen is arguing that we should use reason to critically investigate not just description or theories about the words, but also criticizing, evaluating, assessing choice. Choice of people, choice of organizations, including objectives, values, and priorities. In economics and business, these kind of things, the parameters of choice are not subject of rational discourse or rational criticism. So I think this is a very important, in a way, liberating point by Sen, because reason and choices do not necessarily satisfy the criteria of economic rationality. So economic rationality, just to remind us, is defined as a consistent self-interest maximizing behavior. This is a strong definition of economic rationality. But this is also not just philosophy, this is reality, this is practice. So, but this definition is in conflict with reason. But this conflict, I think, can be a very productive conflict, and it can go forward. And as Sen suggests, we can use reason as a more general concept to judge and evaluate more choices. So this is the basic problem for my research. So what I suggest is a test of three substantive things, or three substantive claims. One is ecology. I will elaborate on that a little bit. Ecology, future generations, and pro-socialness in society. Okay? And I very strongly argue that business activities should pass the test of these three claims to be qualified as reasonable. Okay, we can discuss this, we can establish such a broad claim, but I would suggest to use or think about the early Greek mathematicians suggested as the only way to prove something. It is called the indirect proof. Okay? Indirect proof. So my suggestion is think about ecology, future generation, and pro-socialness in this indirect way, supposing that business activities or political activities, social activities violate. So suppose just the opposite, this is indirect proof. Suppose the opposite, and you will see the consequences lead to absurd, impossible things. This is the only way to prove something according to the early Greek mathematics. So I suggest that this kind of reasoning, so a little elaboration, okay, ecology. I would suggest to forget sustainability and this kind of blah, blah, blah. We can have a more precise, more exact concept from ecology, ecological integrity, ecological health. Ecology is a science, it's a well-developed science, so they have good models and good measures, both ecological integrity and ecological health. So one claim is to be reasonable in business. Your activities should be ecological, which means that not just the preservation of the natural world is important, as it was in outdoor time, land ethics, all this kind of things are very well known. But today, 50 or 60 years later, we should do something for the restoration of the very much destroyed natural world. So this is, for me, is a criteria for reason. Of course, everything is open for public debate. Amartya Sen would say that. But we should open such a debate. So this is one thing. Later on, I will show you some practical working examples from business, okay, which are more or less satisfy this very high, very demanding criteria, showing that this is not impossible. It's very difficult, but it's not impossible. Okay, so this is the test of ecology. Future generations, not yet born people. Okay, how can we future respecting in a way that certainly not decreasing, but trying to increase the freedom of not yet born people. Okay, this is somehow related to ecology because preserving or restoring the ecology of the world certainly serve the interest of not yet born people. But Brown-Weiss argues, and I completely agree, that is much more than that. We need to preserve and manage the cultural heritage of mankind, not just ecology. Cultural heritage of mankind is extremely important for the freedom of future people. Okay? If we are losing languages, we are losing very important architectural or other kind of cultural related things. We are decreasing the freedom of future generations as well as the freedom of all generations. So increasing the freedom of future generations, I think it's an important or highly demanding claim. The last one is closer to today's business reality. I prefer to call it pro-socialness, from the term from psychology, pro-socialness. Anyway, you are familiar with this capability framework developed by Sen and Martin Nussbaum and others. There's a huge movement today. So developing capabilities of people. So the social role of business, or the role of business in the social aspect, not just simply satisfy customer preferences or needs, if you wish, but something more to contribute to the development of capabilities. Then we have good examples in this field from today's mainstream business. So my prime example in this respect is Danone. You know Danone, this French company. They are doing this with their products. But this is just an example, just a thing. So pro-socialness, I think it's very important as a substantive claim of reasonableness of action. So summarizing verbally the things is that I would say responsible leadership develops some direction for action which in one way help to achieve the goals of an organization, including business or communities, in a special way, ecological future perspective and pro-social way. We will see that this kind of a coherence or balance between the two makes it extremely important to achieve your own goals in a way that you satisfy these three very important substantive claims. Without entering into the details, so I'm also developing some methodology for responsible choice and responsible leadership. I would like to show just the main idea behind such a methodology, which is very different from the mainstream economic thinking and methodology for choice. So what I suggest, on which I'm working, is something like a holistic value matrix. Two things are important here. One is that the difference between short-term and long-term. It is also well known in economics. We have a very sophisticated ways to solve this problem, discounting and all kind of things. But I suggest something different. The other thing which is new here is that the first is values for the organization, payoffs for the company, payoffs for the organization, short-term, long-term. But the other three, payoffs for nature, ecological payoffs, payoffs for future generations, short-term, long-term, and payoffs for society at large. So what I suggest to think in this much broader matrix, and think about the impact of a company or an organization, including a university or a college or a hospital. So this just to illustrate the way of thinking. But what is even more important is having this kind of value matrix, holistic value matrix. I think that the traditional way of aggregating values is not enough. So the sum total is not enough. What is very important in this responsibility context is to see the convergence or divergence among these values. Because we have a lot of trade-offs among these values, not just short-term, long-term, but also between the organizational payoffs and the other kind of payoffs. So we should pay a special attention to what I call the coherence of this matrix, or if you don't like this term coherence, you would say convergence of this matrix. So a responsible leader will arrive to this conclusion. Responsible leadership provides some coherence among these payoffs. Not to increase or maximize something at the expense of other important or vitally important values. Of course, there can be different definitions of this coherence, but I suggest, and this is a philosophical consideration, that sum total of values should be weighted somehow with the coherence or convergence of these values. So I think this is a more realistic approach to the total impact of a leadership act or series of act. So in a summarizing way, and after some business examples, okay, so I would say that responsible leadership is something, a holistic value creation. Value creation, well-known in business, economic, okay? But what we really need is a holistic value creation, not just blah, 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 but this kind of a systemic, really, truly systemic view. Holistic is not just a fancy Californian kind of a thing, but really systemic consideration. All the important payoffs simple terms, you should solve the problem of serving the self and the common good simultaneously, but in a balanced way. It's very easy to say, it's very difficult to exercise. Okay, so for me this is holistic value creation, but some methodology support this position. So some examples. I selected one example from US, one example from Europe, and one example from India. Of course, these are living persons and functioning companies, and you can criticize this choice. But that's my choice. I would argue that these people and these companies, in a way, some of them are controversial, I know very well, but these companies and these people are really very close to the idea of responsible leadership, responsible leader, responsible company. From the US, there's no improvisation. I was thinking about this very in a systematic way. So my choice from the US would be 7th generation company. You know this. And the original founder is Jeffrey Hollander. He's a controversial figure. I know this very well. He resigned some years ago. He left the company. You know, he's the leader of Greenpeace USA, and also he's the leader of the US coalition or sustainable US coalition of sustainable companies. More than 50,000 dedicated companies. Also, he's an adjunct professor at the Stern School of Business in New York in sustainability. So he's a very rich person. And you are familiar with seventh generation, I suppose. No? But we can go to the next supermarket and we can buy the product here. So 7th generation is excellently ecological oriented company, and you are familiar with this principle, 7th generation? I think yes, because this is originally from the Iroquois Indian tribe, the 7th generation principle, which means that you should judge every decision of yours in its impact to the 7th generations. The 7th generations means if you calculate, it's about 200 years. 7th generation. One generation is roughly 30 years. 7th generation is 200 years. Now, this is the original Iroquois Indian principle, making decisions. And this company, this is located in Vermont. And they are very successful, so as a business it's very successful. They are producing actually clean, ecological laundry products. Mostly laundry products, but also other kind of health related products. But they use this principle in their practice. So in the ecological sphere, those are 7th generation is explicit reference to future generations. So for me in the US, this is the company which I would say that's something really responsible, close to the responsible leadership idea. So I said, I'm a customer of this company, so I know this product. But it's a very, very famous company, and year by year is ranked number 1 or top 3 in sustainability practice all over the world. Europe, closer to our place, is Holland. This is the bank, Tradeoff Bank, from Holland, Netherlands. Peter Blom is the CEO of Chairman of the board of Tradeoff Bank. Tradeoff Bank is a pioneer in ethical and sustainability banking. This is the most advanced ethical banking institution in the world. And so they started more than 25 years ago. This is a medium-sized bank. And as a bank, it's also rather successful, but they systematically use and apply this so-called triple bottom line principle, which is very on the financial dimension, ecological dimension, and social ethical dimension together. They judge the merit of each and every investment in these triple criteria. In the last 25 years, they financed 40,000 sustainability projects in Holland. 40,000 is much more than the Dutch government did in the last 25 years. So that's still the bank. I know this person, and so that's exceptional. If you are interested, his background, his philosophy, this is really a provider thing in banking. And also, they are not just in Holland, but they are operating in UK, also in Belgium, in Spain, and Germany. So in half of Europe. And from India, I selected this very famous, exceptional company called Organic India, funded by a couple originally from Europe, from Israel. They went to India some 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago, and that kind of a hippie invasion of India. And deeply involved in Hindu spirituality. They developed something on business. Organic India, much before fair trade and these kind of things, they established what we today call fair trade relationship with local producers, producing 100% organic things, mostly food, spices. It's very special kind of it's called Ayurvedic health product for Europe, for India, for Europe and US, also in New York you can buy this product. But they pay an extremely important attention to the health of the land, the health of the local community, fairness, justice, these kind of things. But this is a business. This is a successful business. In a way, it's a hope for India that, of course, is a huge country and more than 1 billion people. But something really responsible can be achieved in that circumstances. So not just in Europe or in the US, but also in a third world country. This is not easy, but it's possible. With some dedication, with some spiritual engagement. So this is my last slide. In a way, summarizing point is that I'm not naive. I'm an economist. I'm working in business school. So there are certain very important preconditions for developing a responsible leadership practice, especially business context. And this is a new kind of a research to systematically study which are the preconditions of this kind of leadership. But certainly there are psychological preconditions related to the personality of the leader, the character, the psychological makeup of the leader. Certainly there are extremely important institutional preconditions for doing something like that. But maybe the most important thing is, and you know this from the history of leadership, enormous social support is needed. What we need is a deep, systemic social support from societal stakeholders in this direction. So we should not be naive about the possibility of responsible leadership. So the last point that I would like to emphasize is that certainly all these kind of things require a very fundamental reconsideration or redefinition of the self and the community. And we need to move into a more inclusive and more compassionate conception of the self and the community. Okay, so I'll stop here. Thank you. We have some 20 minutes for questions, comments, discussion.
I wanted to question the reasonableness of thinking too much about future generations. One is, I think, to be reasonable, you have to go generalize the principle. And I wouldn't want to generalize that principle to the past for two reasons. One is, people 200 years ago had almost no knowledge of what today would be like. And the other one is, I think it's been unfair to ask them to. They were much worse off than we are. Right, so in a way, I want them to think about themselves, to make themselves better off.
So
maybe the same thing about us. You know, we have 200 years from now, no idea. My guess is that if we focus too much on that, we're redistributing resources to a richer society than ours.
Now, first of all, that's a very real question. First of all, I'm not sure that today, so in all generations, we are in a better position than the generation of Thomas Jefferson here.
We are.
Because we are not. I'm not sure that we are. Because we have enormous material wealth, but we have climate problems. So it's not quite clear that how can we compare the position of past generation by present generation and future generation. So this is very, very problematic. This is really multidimensional. But your question is very real, that this kind of focus, or you can say in a way that by extreme focus, or too much focus on future generations, in a way is unfair toward present generations. Brown-West would argue, and I would argue, that this is not the case. It's not the case because like 7 generations example shows that maybe not the extreme focus, but some consideration, some respect for future generations serve our own interest, not necessarily in a very short-term materialistic sense. But if we care about future generations, so it's required from us doing things which, in my view, is also our interest. I don't want to say that there is no conflict. There is. There is conflict. There is conflict between the two, but that's what we can call the art of making decisions, the art of leadership, how to balance this kind of interest. So, another question, university. Okay? So, I think that future people, if you want to build a really great university, like Cambridge or Harvard, you should think about it, and you should invest. In a way, you should sacrifice, you could say, sacrifice the present values or the present interest in order to develop something meaningful for the future, for Harvard 100 years from now, from Cambridge 100 years from now. But I think that's okay. We should do that. There is a conflict, you're right. But also there is a conflict between ecological reason and economic reason. There is also a conflict, in many cases, between pro-socialness or societal reason and economic reason. So we have all this kind of multiple conflicts of interest. I don't want to use the term interest in this discussion, but anyway, so interest in a broad sense. We have this conflict. We should solve this problem somehow. For me, there is a conflict even between ecological reason and future generations things. Because we should make decisions about allocating wealth and also the flows of income and these kind of things between ecology and future generations. So this multiple conflict of interest, and we should make some balanced, that's the point, some balanced decision. Or we should develop, all these business people who suggest that we should be more creative and going beyond as much as possible the trade-offs. Trade-off thinking also at Freeman suggests this, toward the Dartmouth Business School. So going beyond this trade-off, creating new, really novel, new kind of models with much better trade-off or much less conflict. This creativity. So we should not be able to eliminate this conflict altogether. It's not possible. It's not possible because nature is different from future generation. Future generation is different from us, and business interests is different from all of this. But this is the art. This is the art, or if you wish, this is the ethics of leadership. So we should solve in a pragmatic way. We should solve some of these problems. Unfairness, yes. There is some aspects of this, but some creativity, and I mean that also future respect for future war interest, at least partially. And this is the reasoning publicly, debating, what Amartya Sen suggests. Today is the point is that your choice is your choice. But if you are the CEO of Walmart, your choice is not your choice. Because your choice influences half of the world. You can destroy half of the world as a CEO of Walmart. It's not just your sovereignty. So ethics starts here. We should debate. Yeah.
I wanted to explore a little bit your concept of self-interest. When you talk about a business and self-interest, I would go as far as looking at the business and self-preservation. And I bring that up because 200 years ago, the BP America had ruined the Gulf of Mexico. They would have lost the corporate charter. They would have been kicked out. They've been lucky enough to be tarred and feathered. And honestly, what we see nowadays is that a lot of businesses don't have that. We talk about zombie banks, we talk about these businesses that don't have that same idea that their self-preservation is at stake. And it seems to me that should be brought back.
I agree. So it somehow goes back to your point. So the lack of respect or lack of consideration for ecology, for future generations, for society can be something like a self-suicidal thing for your business. So go back to the question of the self. The question of the self and the identity of a company. So you can say self-preservation, self-interest of BP. What is the self-interest of BP? It's not so self-evident. Because in economics you take what's the self-interest of BP. And if you talk to these people, who are trying to figure out what's the interest of a company, that's not given. They develop what is really our interest. So you can argue in this way, but I suggest to expand the concept of the self. And not just all self-interest is to maximize the profit of our company in the next quarter of year. That's stupid. But anyway, our context is responsible leadership. So these companies can do this, can follow this track, but they could not claim, that's my point, they could not claim that what they are doing is reasonable, not to mention responsible. We are interested in responsible leadership and reasonable actions. You can do this, but this is certainly, I wouldn't say serve your interest or not. It's their problem. It's certainly not reasonable. So you can sell it. You can't sell it to the public. That's the point. Because stakeholders will come, that's who business ethics started with this, stakeholders will come and question of legitimacy, maybe not your company, but legitimacy of your action, or legitimacy of your policy. So you should do something. The suggestion is to be a good company, respect the future, you should develop something creative, convergent strategy for engaging this kind of values and reducing the trade-off. I would say reducing the possibility that you will not be in business in a very short future. I'm not sure because we record this, but just in New York, at top business schools, they are working on a very extended, I would say, holistic evaluation of Walmart impact. And it's very negative, the impact. So I'm not sure that 50 years from now, there will be such a company. Or 20 years, 25 years from now. But it's not my business to predict, but we'll see.
I'm not an ethicist, so this might be totally off base, but it sounds like you're conflating the self with an organization. So your argument is that a person should be more interested in ecology and the future and others. And I might be a bad person, and maybe I should be more interested in others and give my money to join and so on, and leave it to future generations. So I sort of see that argument, but I'm also a dean, so there's this organization that I need to kind of think about, and if someone gives resources to that organization, as much as I want to give my money to Joanne, I can't give someone else's money to Joanne. So it seems to me that the organization has constraints that are different from the person, and you're kind of saying...
That was my point, that at least three important preconditions. And the second was my point. The second is institutional organization and structures. So if you are a CEO of Walmart, that's my point. If you're a CEO of Walmart, under the present conditions, you cannot be really responsible. That's the point. That's the point. So we should change something, either in the larger system or in the inner makeup of the organization or institution to be able to develop more responsibility. Absolutely. We should not be naive, because that's the end of any serious scholarship and research. Of course, these companies have a different institutional structure, and they are functioning in a different setting. But in a way, it's not always the question is appropriateness. In which institutional organizational setting, in which society, and which kind of persons can do something meaningful and responsible? That's my question. What is possible in California is not possible in China today, because you need a lot of things supporting you, the ethos of California society and all those kind of things to be successful in this kind of business. Absolutely, absolutely. But if we see the constraints, we can try to work with it. Or make a conclusion, as I made a conclusion, it's just a private thing, that as a CEO of Walmart, you cannot do too much things. Some of my friends work with Walmart sustainability policy in New York. And there are limits. There are limits. There are limits. It's up to you that you want to be engaged in such incremental things. Or my suggestion is, especially for younger people, to focus on brand new initiatives like Tradeoff bank, ethical banking, or other kind of things. When the context is different and the institutional structure is different, you can develop a more genuine, responsible practice.
I have one comment, one question. So the comment is, you assume that economists assume that everybody is self-interested, but based on my understanding of economics, people are actually utility maximizer. So it doesn't mean they're self money, and it becomes a money seeking for profit seeking. But it seems like your idea is to broaden the definition of utility. Instead of focus on the economic system, but focus on the ecological system, human development system, and social system as well. So it seems like it's also a self-interested motive. It's just you define utility and function differently.
Two things. One is that we should go beyond the concept of utility because it's not just utility, but other kind of values. But in a way, utility is a technical term or values in economics. So in a way, I'm not against this. A psychological theory of utilitarianism is more problematic. But if you use this as a technical term for values, why not? This is yes. But if you broaden this utility function, okay, if you broaden this, you redefine implicitly the concept of the self. This is my point, and this is what we really need. What we really need to define a company, to define a college in a more inclusive way. That there was no time, but my example for business students or business audience is always that how do you define success for your company? How do you define success? What is success? And these ethical banks people say, really, we measure who measure success. We define and measure success in a really multidimensional way. So all stakeholder success is all success, but it's not blah, blah, blah. They measure their success in this way. All stakeholders are us. Or like in the college or in university, your alumni is you. Your alumni success is your success. In a very, also in terms of money, but also in a much broader sense. So how do you define success? It's really how do you define yourself? What is you? What is your identity? That's a crucial question. But the point is that today in business, almost everywhere in the world, in business we have a very, very narrow concept of the self, what we are. And we should broaden this enormously because we will die. We will die. So, and we can kill the climate and we can kill the earth with this extremely narrow definition of the self. So this is the point. It's in a way it's our vital interest to go beyond self-interest. That's a paradox. That's all self-interest, to go beyond self-interest.
I believe our time is up, so I would like to